Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, the man behind the League of Nations and World War I diplomacy. But what you might not know is the deeply human, complicated, and fascinating lives of the women he raised. His three daughters, Margaret, Jessie, and Eleanor. One became a spiritual seeker in India, another a fierce political voice, and the third, a White House bride who turned author. So, whatever happened to Woodrow Wilson's daughters? Number 3. Margaret Woodrow Wilson. Margaret Woodrow Wilson was born on April 16, 1886, in Gainesville, Georgia. The eldest of the three Wilson daughters, she grew up in a household of academic rigor, Southern tradition, and political dreams. She attended Goucher College in Baltimore and studied voice and piano at the prestigious Peabody Institute. From a young age, Margaret stood out. She wasn't just intelligent, she was fiercely independent. Her interests ran deep into the arts, and she pursued music with the same intensity that her father poured into law and governance. But everything changed in 1914. That year, her mother, Ellen Axon Wilson, died. In the shadow of loss, Margaret stepped up to fill a national role, acting First Lady of the United States. At just 28, she became the White House hostess during a pivotal moment in her father's presidency. It was the early years of World War I, and Margaret handled the public duties with grace, professionalism, and a unique flair. But being First Lady wasn't her dream. After her father remarried Edith Galt in 1915, Margaret returned to her private life, but not quietly. She turned to music and activism. Her 1915 recording of The Star-Spangled Banner is one of the earliest ever made. She raised funds for the Red Cross and traveled to France to perform for troops during World War I. Her concerts weren't just patriotic performances, they were soul-bearing connections between home and front line. Still, Margaret was restless. She moved to Greenwich Village, New York, the center of bohemian life at the time. She mingled with feminists, artists, activists. She never married, perhaps partly because her trust fund came with a condition. It ended if she did. But Margaret didn't seem to mind. She had her art, her independence, and her voice. Then came the twist no one saw coming. In the 1930s, while visiting the New York Public Library, Margaret stumbled upon a book on Eastern mysticism. It lit a fire inside her. By 1938, she left America altogether, traveling to India to join the ashram of Sri Aurobindo. She became Nistha, Sanskrit for dedication. This wasn't a sabbatical. It was a permanent move. Margaret spent the rest of her life in Pondicherry, diving deep into spiritual texts, co-editing the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna with mythologist Joseph Campbell, and living out her beliefs. She refused to leave India during World War II, even when urged by the US government. In 1944, at the age of 57, Margaret died in India. She's buried there, the only first daughter to spend her final years not in the spotlight, but in spiritual solitude on the other side of the world. Number 2. Jessie Woodrow Wilson Sayre. Jessie Wilson was born on August 28, 1887, and raised in Princeton, New Jersey, while her father served as a professor at Princeton University. She was the middle child, and often the bridge between her idealistic older sister and her socially gifted younger one. Jessie attended Miss Fine's school, then Goucher College, where she too joined Gamma Phi Beta. But while her sisters leaned toward music and writing, Jessie was drawn to something different: social reform. After graduation, she worked at a settlement house in Philadelphia, directly addressing poverty and poor living conditions in urban neighborhoods. She wasn't interested in parties or spotlight. She was interested in progress. Then, in 1913, Jessie did something historic. She married Francis Bowes Sayre in the East Room of the White House, one of only a handful of weddings ever held there. The Sayres had 3 children, Francis Jr., Eleanor, and Woodrow. But motherhood didn't slow Jessie down. In fact, it pushed her even further into activism. She joined the YWCA National Board. She fought for women's suffrage, long before it was popular. She joined the League of Women Voters. She supported the League of Nations. She was one of those rare voices that seemed to belong in the future, speaking truth in rooms that weren't ready to hear it yet. In 1928, she gave the keynote speech at the Democratic National Convention, a massive deal at a time when women in politics were still a novelty. And then came a moment that could have changed American history. Jessie was floated as a potential U.S. Senate candidate from Massachusetts. People were ready for her, but she wasn't ready for them. She turned it down, choosing instead to become secretary of the Massachusetts Democratic State Committee. In 1933, at just 45 years old, Jessie died following abdominal surgery. Her death shocked the political community. She was rising, fast, and many believed she was destined to become the first woman senator. In her honor, the Women's Democratic League in Boston renamed itself the Jessie Woodrow Sayre Women's Democratic League. Number 1. Eleanor Randolph Wilson McAdoo. Born on October 16, 1889. She attended St. Mary's School in North Carolina, and by all accounts, was the most traditionally social of the Wilson daughters. She was athletic, elegant, and engaging, the kind of girl newspapers loved to describe as an ideal society woman. But Nellie's life took a very public turn in 1914, when she married William Gibbs McAdoo, her father's Secretary of the Treasury, in a White House wedding. It was glamorous. The Blue Room, flowers, journalists, the whole nation watching. They had 2 daughters, Ellen and Mary Faith. And for a while, things seemed perfect. But being the daughter of a president and the wife of a powerful man doesn't mean the story ends happily. The marriage ended in divorce in 1934, something scandalous and difficult at the time. After the split, Eleanor turned inward and found her voice in writing. She wrote a memoir, The Woodrow Wilsons, in 1937, a deeply personal, humanizing look at her family inside the White House. It wasn't just a puff piece. It was filled with memories, heartbreaks, laughter, a family story, not a political pitch. She followed it up with a novel in 1946, Julia and the White House, clearly inspired by her own experiences. During World War II, Eleanor threw herself into public service, helping with war bond drives. In the 1950s, she campaigned for Adlai Stevenson, still passionate, still engaged. In 1965, she suffered a cerebral hemorrhage that marked the beginning of her decline. She passed away in 1967 at the age of 77 in Montecito, California, and was laid to rest at Santa Barbara Cemetery. They didn't just live in the shadows of their father. They built their own legacies, brick by brick, song by song, speech by speech. In a time when women